Hi, my name's Anna, and I have schizoaffective disorder bipolar type. And today I would like to talk about the difference between living with awareness versus ignorance. And they say ignorance is bliss, and honestly, I kind of have to agree, and here's why. I have gone most of my life with these experiences that I have. So it was just normal to me. I had no idea that anything was wrong, so to say. And so I never really thought twice about the things I would do and my behavior. I didn't think it was necessarily odd or strange in any way. I knew I was a little off. I never really quite fit in. I always had very few friends, especially in like middle and high school. I kind of became friends with more of the outcast group of people because I just never really fit into the mainstream of life. So that also became a little bit harder for me as I entered adulthood, this making and maintaining friendships, because I just kind of kept myself so busy and distracted that I didn't even have to pay attention to myself. So I sure as hell didn't have time to pay attention to other people if I wasn't even giving myself the time of day. I had kids very young, I worked a full-time job, and I went to school all at the same time for years. And this worked for a while until one day it didn't, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about how my isolation in adulthood really allowed me to live in this ignorance and not have to take a look in the mirror and check myself. The only person I really had was my husband, who I've known since I was 15 years old. So he's kind of the only one who's really seen me go through the course of this condition from beginning till now. And he's kind of the only one who had pointed out to me over time that I should really look into possibly having some type of schizophrenia spectrum disorder. And I just kind of brushed it off. I was like, no, I don't have that. It's not me. Like, I'm fine. What are you talking about? But that was the only feedback point I had. My parents were also very ignorant when it came to my condition, and I struggled a lot, especially in high school. I was tested for learning disabilities, and I don't have any of those. So after that, they just kind of left it and didn't further seek to find out why I was struggling so greatly, especially in high school. And it wasn't until I think it was my dean. I remember sitting in the dean's office with bright orange hair, and they were reprimanding me because it wasn't a natural hair color. And somehow the conversation ended up with me getting a police escort to the county mental hospital. I have no idea how that happened, and I just kind of went along with it, again, living in that ignorance and just letting life happen to me and going with the flow of whatever was going on. Once I got a county mental hospital, they transferred me to a different mental hospital that our insurance covered, and I was placed on a 72-hour hold. I ended up staying for about 2 weeks, and then after that, I started seeing a psychiatrist. I went through, I have no idea how many medications, honestly. I think the medications they were giving me were so sedating that it really affected my memory of that time of my life. I have very, very little recollection of what actually happened. Later on, I found out what my diagnoses were during this time period. But at this time, nobody told me what was going on with me. They were just prescribing me medications, and I was just taking them, and I never asked any questions. I never asked what they were prescribing me, why they were prescribing it to me. I just did what I was told, basically, and I abused some of the medication for a little bit because it was so sedating. If I took too many of them, it would make me appear as if I was drunk, which I did kind of haphazardly one time because a handful of my medication spilled in the sink and they all got wet, so I decided I was going to take them. And I remember my mom questioning me in CVS if I was drunk, and I was like, no, I'm not. I'm fine. So that just goes to show the power of how ignorant I was to think that I was okay in any state of mind, that I was doing well and that I was good. And I think that's just kind of part of the condition as well, is this ignorance and lack of self-awareness when it comes to my behavior. It took about 10 years for me to find out what my diagnosis was when I was 18 in 2011. And when I found out that diagnosis, it turns out it started as bipolar 2, which is really common for the diagnosis progression of a schizophrenia spectrum disorder, is to be diagnosed with some type of bipolar first. And what I've learned is that doctors really do not like to give out the diagnosis of schizophrenia. It's an end-of-the-rope diagnosis. They have to rule everything out before they put that label on you. And it is definitely not handed out like candy at Halloween. So I really had to earn that diagnosis. And I kind of just was myself. And I didn't try to hide anything. I didn't try to portray anything. I would just show up to my appointments, answer the questions, get the medication, and be done with the day. So when I found out this information, I was really in denial in the beginning. I didn't want to believe that I could have had such a severe condition and been diagnosed and not have known. That was just mind-blowing to me. Like, how could I have not known that my behavior was so off and just so not the norm? How could my experiences not be the same experiences that everybody else has? How did I function and survive for so long? And I mean, I was even thriving towards the end of this little escapade for a little bit. I was the communications and marketing director of an early childhood education company, and I was doing really well until I wasn't. And I ended up losing my job because I was not performing as well as I thought I was. This was also the time that I started taking my mental health a lot more seriously. I got back into seeing a therapist. I got back into seeing a psychiatrist. I reached out and got all my old medical records, which is how I learned of my diagnosis. And it was just a lot for me to be going through and to be trying to hold an overtime job, not even a full-time job. I was working ridiculous hours because I was on salary, and that's just, I guess, what happens is they take advantage of people who work on salary. And despite my struggles and the progression of my condition and my husband's efforts to really get me to take a look in the mirror, I just brushed it all off. Previously, I would just ride the waves of my episodes as if everything was fine. I lived in extremes, and there was no gray area for me to operate in. I either was or I wasn't. I was all in or I was all out. There was no compromise for me. And I think my severe isolation in adulthood really allowed me to live in this ignorant space of not having that feedback to let me know when I'm being out of control or when I'm being really depressed and withdrawn. And so that was really something working against me in the grand scheme of things, was not having that support system in place, because I haven't talked to my dad in years. He probably also had some type of condition. My mom was in denial. She claims she never knew about my diagnoses back when I was a teen, but I find that very hard to believe. But maybe because I was 18, they didn't release my medical information to her. I don't really know the details of that. But anyways, And then there was my husband. And I had one friend who I would kind of talk on and off with, but that was not really an in-person relationship, and it was very intermittent, so they couldn't really get a full picture of me and my behavior. And that really just allowed me to roam free and wild and do whatever I wanted to do, however I wanted to do it, when I wanted to do it, which really affected my overall well-being in hindsight. At the time, I thought I was fine. I thought I was doing well. I was doing what I believed to be the right thing. And that's one thing I've learned, that with this condition is just because I believe it's true does not necessarily mean it's true. It's delusional thinking, essentially, when you have these thoughts that are not based in what I call the collective reality. The same reality that everyone else is experiencing gets distorted from your internal perception. And that makes it really difficult to tell the difference between what the collective reality is and what your reality is, and where the line is drawn in the middle. That line gets extremely blurred, and it's very difficult to tell the difference. So after losing my job and having to move back into my childhood home and become unemployed, I really had to take a look in the mirror and come to terms with my reality that in 2011, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and that was really all the information I had. And I was really in denial for a long time. I didn't want to believe it was true, and I started doing research to basically try to prove it wrong, to prove that the diagnosis was wrong, the doctor didn't know what he was talking about, and that it wasn't true. Unfortunately, I related to a lot more content than I would have liked to, and slowly that reality started to sink in for me. I had no longer known who I was, because everything I knew about myself up until that point was now questionable, because I didn't know I had this condition. So if I didn't know I had this condition, then how much of my life was based in delusion, essentially? How much of it was based in a false reality that nobody else was experiencing? So I basically was starting from square one, like completely over, brand new baby, just freshly born into the world, and trying to discover who I am and who I am with this condition and how this condition affects my life, because it's a condition of the mind, and your mind controls your entire existence. So if that is not functioning properly, then how can you truly know yourself? Living in ignorance, you have to have self-awareness in order to really have control over the condition, rather than the condition having control over you, so that you can live a healthy and thriving life, and you can have great interpersonal relationships with friends and family and just other people you meet, and really form those deep connections with others, because we are very social creatures, and we need those connections in order to thrive in our life. And you can't do that if you don't know yourself first, and if you're not connected to yourself first. I was so distracted by my everyday life that I didn't have the opportunity to really connect with myself until I became unemployed and started devoting every ounce of my existence to learning about myself and learning about my condition and learning about my needs and what I can do to, number one, be stable, and number two, live well, and number three, thrive. Because I'm not just here to survive. I know there's a lot more I can do with my time and my efforts, and I really want to be able to help other people who have been in my shoes, or who are in my shoes, or who might try on my shoes just to see how they fit, so that way they can get the earliest intervention possible in order to better their prognosis in the long term. I think I have improved my prognosis by developing this self-awareness. I will say though, it has not come easy to me. In 2023, I had been seeing a psychiatrist for a while, and I went through quite a few med changes. And during one of these medication changes, I started to experience delusional thinking again, but I didn't notice it because I had not yet developed the self-awareness that I needed to catch it. And so I eventually stopped taking my medication. I stopped going to my appointments, and I just kind of quit taking care of my mental health altogether. And it didn't take long because that October, I ended up having another major episode that obliterated my family structure. And we're all still recovering from that. And I really need to rebuild my trust with my family right now. But we are doing better. And it was after that episode that I really realized the severity of my condition and how detrimental it can be and how it affects the lives of other people in such a big way. Because in this episode, I got a lot more people involved. I had started building a very small friend group. And so when I had this episode, I pulled everybody into it. And a lot of people got to experience it. And it was really complicated. And it was not a good experience. Nobody really knew what to do. And they just took my word for everything, which was not the right thing to do, because despite me disclosing my condition to them, there really is a lack of awareness out there as to what that entails. And so when I'm coming to people with these wild accusations and ideas and perspectives, they just kind of took it to be truth because I believed it was true. And so if I believed it must be true, then it must be true. And they just didn't know. These were all fairly new friends, and they had never seen me go through an episode before. I had never seen me go through an episode before. I've had countless episodes, but I've never really experienced it with any level of self-awareness. I just kind of would go through it like it was just a normal everyday thing to experience and not think twice about it. So now that I've had this episode with a little bit of self-awareness, I've got some hindsight in hand, and I have been working obsessively to create a plan that's going to help me and my care team to prevent another episode. I diligently started working on this with my therapist. I did a lot of writing and meditating and journaling and planning, and there was a lot of hindsight involved. I went back and looked at all kinds of aspects of my life, and my brain probably looked like one of those maps where they're trying to catch a serial killer and there's red string going everywhere at all the different points, and it's just a mess, but it's an organized mess. And I will say that that has really helped me in practice, because now that I deepened that level of self-awareness that I have, I was able to make the connections that I needed to make, and I recently prevented myself from going into another episode. I was able to catch the early warning signs, call my doctor, let my husband know, and just kind of inform everybody that, hey, I'm starting to go into another episode. What can we do to get me back to baseline sooner? And it worked. And I am so thankful for having that self-awareness to be able to do that, because without it, I probably would be having another episode right now, and I wouldn't have been making this video. Words cannot express how thankful I am for having this level of self-awareness. My relationships have really improved with consistent effort. I'm feeling a lot more stable and grounded. And best of all, I dodged another episode, which is my ultimate goal here. It's like playing dodgeball with my episodes right now. And I've just got to dive and dodge and try to avoid them at all possible costs, because since that last major episode in October, I'm going to repeat this because I really realized the severity and the seriousness of my condition during that episode, and with the hindsight that I gained from it. and the level of self-awareness that I developed from it as well. So while living in ignorance is, in a sense, easier, I really don't recommend it. It affects the lives of so many other people that you're not even considering. And it's not just you involved, it's your family, it's your friends, it's your coworkers, it's your boss, it's the person on the street. I mean, there's so many different interpersonal relationships that we have in our lives that we don't realize we're affecting on a daily basis with the choices we make. And if we are not in a healthy state of mind, then we're not making healthy choices and we're not taking that into consideration. Maintaining self-awareness at a deep level is a full-time job. Trust me, it really is. It's a lot of work. I would not trade it for the world. 10 out of 10. I would totally recommend developing some deeper self-awareness with yourself. Even if you think you've got a good grip on your reality and you think, oh no, like, I'm good, I really think you should give it a deeper look, because making those connections with yourself in turn affects the connections you can make with other people, and it just really enhances your life overall and really gives you that sense of peace and stability that we all strive to have. It's really great for reducing stress too, which I know is something we can all relate to. We all experience stress. So having that self-awareness of your stress triggers and your behaviors that happen when you get stressed, and just deepening how well you know yourself, is really going to give you the upper hand in your day-to-day life. So I hope you found some value in this video. I really enjoyed making it. This was a really important one for me because it took up such a large part of my life and really affected me in a lot of different ways, for better and for worse, and I've learned a lot from it. So hopefully you can learn from my experience too. I hope you are well and safe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye now.